Excited to speak to you about our experience in investing in NFTs and NFTs at the intersection of DeFi. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves very briefly and say why they're excited about investing in NFTs. We're all panelists, so it's going to be a free-flow discussions, but I'll try to steer it and make it really a conversation this morning. Do you want to start?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joyce Lai, and I have a company called New Territories. I do advisory consulting and also some investments through my entity. In terms of investing in NFTs, although I've been in the space since 2017, I think I've only more recently come to really appreciate what NFTs is about, like all the communities, and why it's all extremely important. I think at the minimal is going to be the way that companies and projects promote themselves. Is absolutely going to be the way that people use that as a mechanism to actually get in touch with their user base, with their fans. So I think going forward, it'll be indispensable.
Couldn't agree more. Good morning, everyone. Taylor, WARHODL. I've been an artist for a long time. I've done startups. But as WARHODL, the last 6-7 months have just been such a game changer. And NFTs, it's become a vehicle and a paradigm shift, which is totally what I'm excited about.
Kain from Synthetics, and someone's shilling me Illuvium on stage here. Yeah, no, I'm definitely aware of Illuvium. So I'm, I guess, primarily interested in NFTs as a DeFi founder because over the last kind of 3 months, I think the narrative has sort of shifted from this idea that we all had, which was really dumb back in 2020, even 2019, that DeFi was so amazingly incredible that everyone was going to just flood into the space and be super excited to use, Compound and Synthetics and Aave and all of these different DeFi protocols. And I think the reality was that they actually aren't that interesting, and finance is actually not that interesting to most people. And so it's been incredible to watch all of us work so hard in the DeFi space to try and get excitement into the space and really kind of struggle except from a speculative perspective, and then watch NFTs just flood across every aspect of culture and just see how easy it was for people to kind of grok it and get excited about it. So I think that NFTs for me are going to save DeFi. That's kind of my thesis at this point.
Nice. So my name is Vanessa. Grellet. I'm the head of portfolio growth at Coin Fund. Coin Fund invested very early in NFT platforms such as WARHODL. We were early investors in Dapper and been in this space for a long time. On a personal note, I was very lucky to be in NFTs very early and sort of preaching the desert about them. And so it's so nice to be here today and seeing everyone getting excited about it. I think we want to touch upon sort of the pain points right now about investing in NFTs and NFT infrastructure and what is needed for this market to really mature. Have everyone access it, have it more secure, more liquid. So we'd love to have the artist perspective and then sort of the market infrastructure also perspective and others.
Yeah, it's become such an onslaught in the best way possible. And when you think back, to a traditional artist career, in your life, I think you would be lucky to have a dozen or 2 dozen collectors in any capacity, let alone an ongoing basis. And with the NFT space, the last 6-7 months, just my main collection on OpenSea, it's at 500 wallets, 500 collectors. That's overwhelming, right? And it's awesome, but it's also figuring out how to navigate that best. And DMs aren't working. I wish there was folders, so I'm working on bootstrapping something in that field just to help better address it.
One thing that I always thought would be cool and helpful is if the data itself and the conversations around a particular piece actually flowed with the piece itself. Like, I'm not an engineer, so maybe this is harder than I'm making out to be to build it, but why is it that all the conversation that happens around one thing, even, or if, it gets mentioned in the news or something, like, why is that information not tagged to the actual token itself, so that when it travels around, you can see, why it was important before, like what people's sentiment was about it, why it is relevant in the social space. I don't know how to keep track of everything that, is being discussed around any particular artwork, and I don't really think I should be the one to have to go search for that, right? So I think things like that to really change the way we look at information and data as it relates to NFT pieces, I think would be really useful.
Great, we have music also.
Thanks for the music.
So a little bit more curation, trying to find the information in a more easy way.
Yeah, curation, but also a new way for to look at data, right? I think right now our data structure is one where it is revolving around a person. So in the future, like, the data can revolve around a thing, and that would be just as useful, if not more useful and valuable.
So I'll try not to go into like boring DeFi mode too much, but I think we still have this issue of scaling, right? And we still have this issue of like which platforms, which base layer chains, whether it's Ethereum or some Ethereum L2 or Polygon or Solana or wherever, where do we want these things to live? And how do we ensure that we get some level of consensus or agreement around like where these things are going to be deployed? And for the last like 3 or 4 years, it's all really been engineers driving this. Engineers have been making the decisions. And now all of a sudden you have this different dynamic where it's actually people who are creating content. It's artists and musicians and people who are coming into the space who have a very different set of trade-offs that they're looking for potentially. And I think that until we get to a point where as an industry we've got some level of consensus around like which of these platforms are going to do well and which are going to survive, and at the moment it's very fragmented, it's going to be hard for a new person coming in to kind of understand what the different trade-offs are. So I do think that we still have this scaling challenge, particularly on the Ethereum side, where until Ethereum is scaled, the cost of transacting is just so high that a lot of people are going to be forced to kind of look in other places and other chains, etc. So I think hopefully next year we'll get our scaling stuff sorted out and we'll be in a better place. But at the moment it is a bit challenging.
So we've seen a movement of financialization of NFTs. People are trading NFTs like any other financial assets now. Historically, art has been an asset where, people in their portfolio, a limited number of people in their portfolio put art, which was really had a different sort of a return profile than stocks, etc. How do you see the future of NFT financialization? There's a lot of platforms that allow you now to lend your NFTs, maybe create at some point derivatives on NFTs. We see as a VC a lot of projects in the space. Where do you guys think that's going to help or hurt the NFT space?
Sure, maybe I can start. So it may help to know that I'm also a lawyer by training. My most recent crypto job was an attorney at Consensus. So I see this from like a couple of different lenses, maybe starting from the more regulatory policy side. I think NFTs create just this massive amount of question marks that I don't think we're really gonna resolve in the near future. I think some of it will be taken care of in the more traditional sense. So I think we're all gonna figure out how things probably can and should be taxed soon. People are gonna need to start thinking about KYC very seriously, especially with the new FATF guidance that has the final guidance that has come out from FATF, which is an international organization that effectively suggests to countries how they should implement their KYC programs. And And yeah, I think there's just going to be a lot of questions in terms of the financialization of it. Generally speaking, I think right now NFTs are mostly artwork. In the future, NFTs will be anything you would like it to be. I think people will call it something else, soon. And so when that happens, I think you'll see a lot of traditional type financial instruments, right? I'm seeing people that are making tranches of other assets based on different types of NFT assets, right? I don't know if you guys read that Matt Levine article about Tether, where he talks about the magic of turning different types of assets with different risk profiles into stable coins effectively. So I think you can see products like that coming up that are more traditional. In terms of different types of financial products, I think it will make things, we'll have new products, but also just cheaper products, ones where the actual financial rails are built into the asset. So, reducing costs, maybe improves information transparency, right there within the product itself.
Yeah, and personally, I'm intrepidatious to even say investing in NFTs because some of the best, that I've picked up on, I wouldn't have told you that they would become what they have, like Bored Apes, right? Also having been an ICO junkie, in 17 and 18, just taking all this day at a time is really my stance. That being said, NFTs are a vehicle, right? And I've, from the early days of Clubhouse, it's just something that I've shouted from the mountaintop, that how lucky the creative world, artists, are essentially the first use case around NFTs, but what that permeates into as far as real estate or transactions happening in that regard, it's bound to happen. It just, the other point that I make often, it's NFTs are a direct value exchange. And, to make transactions more seamless, right? Talking beyond art, that's where it's heading, and it feels inevitable.
I think for me, crypto is about one of the fundamental reasons why crypto is so interesting is market efficiency. Right? There's this idea that you can take an existing market that might be quite inefficient, and you can apply crypto principles, whether it's self-custody or consensus mechanisms, crypto economic incentives, and you can make that market much more efficient. And I think that when we look at the sort of market for culture, it's been traditionally a very inefficient market. You've got, the traditional art market obviously is one of the most inefficient markets in the world. It's crazy. But even things like, streaming payments for musicians and things like that, a lot of these industries are very ossified, and I think crypto has the power to come in and make changes to make these markets more efficient. Across multiple dimensions, right? It's not just from a financial perspective, it's also access, it's distribution, it's, the ability to monetize directly. It's, there's multiple dimensions that crypto is going to be able to really, change these markets. And so I think for artists who have been kind of existing in these very traditional market structures, NFTs and crypto just feels very freeing. This idea that you can just turn up and it's like the early internet, right? It's just so powerful, such a powerful technology. So I think that we're just barely scratching the surface right now in terms of what markets will look like for these cultural artifacts in the next decade. It's going to be very, very different.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think we're still at the stage where we're replicating the traditional markets, especially in art. So, Thursday night there's an auction of digital art. So we're really still, also we're replicating some stuff in DeFi, we're innovating, but it's hard for us to completely be separated from the physical art or what we've been doing for a lot of years. So if we wanted to create this new way of engaging with NFTs and art and communities, what needs to be true from a market infrastructure in order for us to get there? What are the new projects that should, succeed? What are the new mechanisms that you see needs to be adopted by mainstream in order for that to be true?
Yeah, the thing that I always keep in mind is just the onboarding process, right? Like, crypto is very daunting in many ways. It's a foreign language ultimately, like with NFTs, it's a foreign language that we've been able to understand, and like in any capacity, the fact that we do, I think we're lucky. We're early, right? But that being said, it's like Coinbase with them doing the NFT marketplace, like feels, if you look at the early UI, it feels very Instagram-ish. OpenSea, has been awesome, but just the onboarding process in general, one, to crypto, two, into the NFT space, so we don't sound as crazy.
I think that's true, but humans have an almost infinite capacity to absorb new UX patterns, right? At first, they seem like really crazy. Like, you look at things like email, but you can go even further back, right? Like written language, right? Like we have this capacity to create new like usability patterns and absorb them, and they just become part of our culture, and everyone knows how they work. Everyone is very comfortable with them, and crypto is going to be that. Like in maybe like 3 or 5 years, every single person will get self-custody. Every single person will get wallets, and of course the UX will improve. It's terrible right now, and people will come in and they will innovate and they'll make amazing new things that we can't even imagine, but people will get the fundamental concepts, right? And at the moment they don't. The vast majority of the world does not have a fucking clue how a crypto wallet works, but we will get there, and once we get there, then all of a sudden you have this huge addressable market for all of these other services, and it feels very much like the early internet. Like the early internet was like, how do you connect like a modem, right? Like, oh yeah, sorry, I just picked up my phone while you were on the internet and now you're disconnected. Like just dumb shit like that like will go away over time and people will get used to it.
Yeah, one thing that I found useful when I talk to people who, quote, just don't get it right now, I just ask them very simply, why is it you can't get your money from your bank on the weekend? And then then they're like, you're right, it's my money. Why couldn't I get it on the weekends? I'm not sure, right? And then it's worked for me, maybe it'll work for you guys too.
Yes?
Regarding especially NFTs or tokenizations, DAOs, all the securities, all the regulations, obviously know what's going to happen. What kind of concerns or precautions are you guys taking in that respect?
None.
So the question is, given the regulatory uncertainty, what precautions should investors take or projects take in that context? I'll piggyback on Kain's answer is that, we're in a rapid innovation stage, and, the regulation is never going to catch up with how quickly things move. And so, you have to test things out, obviously not get legal advice, but we see things that are as ambiguous as fractionalization, who have, huge success right now, and framing fractionalization as creating a community, whereas a regulator could see it as a security. And so I think understanding, what the project stands for and what the end game is about the NFT that it's creating is really going to be a game changer here. And sometimes, you feel like there's so many people buying NFTs. There's such a huge global public right now that is adopting blockchain technology. It's kind of unstoppable at this stage. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't be any safeguards or KYC or any other regulation that should be abided with. But we're going to be in a situation for a long time where we have to live with this ambiguity. That's my gut feeling.
Yeah, I just like the one addition I guess I would add to that, to be very explicit, is if you're in the NFT space and you're doing something that is not, the financialization of NFTs or whatever, it's just the normal NFT space, I think that from a regulatory perspective, those projects are very, very safe. Like there are hundreds of DeFi projects that are doing way crazier things that the regulators are much more concerned about. I think the average person working in NFTs right now, from a regulatory perspective, is very, very comfortable.
We have a lawyer here, but doesn't want to speak.
Yeah, actually I want to follow up on that question and what you just said. A couple of weeks ago, actually close to a month ago, there was a class action filed against one of the projects, and the lead plaintiff said basically that NFTs are investment contracts, and in that case it was unregistered, so therefore, all the MD5 issues, everything falls into place. And I was just wondering, that seems to be one of the first cases to test this issue, but have you guys thought about whether or not it falls into the investment contract definition of the Howey test, or is that something that, because what you're saying is basically you're not caring too much about that, but it's actually happening.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, like, are NFTs going to pass the Howey test, or what are some of the facts that could cause an NFT to be considered an investment contract? And of course I think that there are things that you can do that are going to make that more or less likely, but fundamentally, when you're talking about a JPEG, right, which is just referencing some piece of data on the blockchain, it's that itself feels weird to call that an investment contract. I think the mechanism by which that's distributed could make that more or less investment-like, but ultimately, the distribution mechanisms that we're seeing that are fairly open and fairly transparent, I think are probably going to stand up to that. But we'll see. I mean, it's definitely a place that lawyers are going to have a lot of fun for a while.
All right, we're almost out of time. I just want to ask everyone for one sentence, where are NFTs in 5 years? And we didn't prepare this question, so.
I guess I'll start. NFTs in 5 years, I think you're going to see every single major brand doing NFTs, right? I think people with large IP portfolios are probably now thinking, oh my God, there's this brand new way for me to make all this money with things I already own without doing really too much extra work. How great is that, right? So I think you'll see people with huge IP portfolios really trying to figure out how to do that. And I think that'll be mostly everybody.
Yeah, the irony is, the last thing I saw before going to bed last night was a McDonald's tweet that they have an NFT drop. And I do come from a family of attorneys, and so I'm just so curious what the fine print is. And the fine print, of course, is like 10 pages. But in terms of like where NFTs go, I think enabling experiential, that, and probably more so in the background. People may not be as like NFT savvy, however, it'll be the undercurrent of experience. So that's my view.
I think NFTs are going to be in places that we don't expect them. Right now, there's obvious things that NFTs are really applicable for, but it's going to be the non-obvious cases that are going to be the most interesting in like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think NFTs will be, the way we interact with the world. So it will be community, it will be social media. It will also be extended to other sort of assets, whether it's financial instruments, whether it's real assets, and people, will be comfortable at this stage with, the wallets, the crypto experience, et cetera, and large institutions who are already investing in NFTs will have that as part of their portfolios in the future. So we see a future bright ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, Vanessa, thank you for leading the conversation.
Yeah.
this
Thank you,
morning.
Vanessa.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's early.
Thanks,
We're all
everyone.
here. Like, good on you all.
Thank you.
So
Let's give them a hand,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.